whether at first these slam the reason and rather these slam and siphon towards whether against me. Whether reason their money reproduction towards me. To such a level there could be some rebound back to when before it was quite an enfeebled mistake. At this trend, it's going to call forth, it's going to become an eventual or whether result to Hitler's second return, whether the second Hitler, whether Hitler too comes and wipe those out with assault rifles. This is absolutely atrocious. The level of Nazism, astounding. When I do something, it maximum probably makes a dent. Check out what the Pokemon Go consumerist, whether reason whether consumer first and whether consumerist reason there. To the cause landscape changes, yet all of such, and notice that all of it, vast amount of effort are sent towards fighting at me. Reason there considerable huge amount of enfeeblement. That really sort of changes the vote. And before which there was a formulating of whether before reason thereof, or whether before thereof there was earlier upon whether the reason there original four notes of and whether reason now and whether reason there are five notes of and before which four notes of whether reason there includes with and whether reason there are five notes of and before which and whether reason there whether before and whether earlier ago and whether reason there whether earlier of four notes of. Somehow that's suitable to be on throughout. It wouldn't therefore dent to whether inflict to a or whether reason and whether probable and whether reason and whether inflict towards whether reason or the whether sort of represents a bit of probable and similar measures for which therefore I don't stick to the some of the activities as much. It is overall a giant hectic fuss. That's the occasion to use the word fuss. There something will be fussful, whether something there which whether reason and whether something will be fudge. Is this current situation like no way out? Like I could be immolating my whether reason, for instance, I could be immolating myself at downtown squares. It wouldn't even cause any changes. For the eventual, for the fighting back and removing this cancerous. But while there's any-sex place to remove, how is one supposed to sprung out of it? That must be some magical being and pays keen attention to detail to must be able to still overwrite a lot of the NSX race. How is that Morpheus can still be able to ask to perform at a certain level after these pumps? There's such invitation to speak disorganizedly, and while if so reason there just and whether reason there and whether just whether reason and whether invitations of and commentations throughout, right, from the Nazism entities. These are going to attrition grind. These speak foully, we speak foully, these damage themselves, or whether also whether the original of being, whether reason and whether reason they're just and whether reason and whether just being and whether reason there and whether comes simultaneous. Takes a bit of damage to its hijack coefficient, and we take some damage. And I'm supposed to have to verse it out each of the moment earlier ago, whether reason and whether it could be considered may not had express whether present and whether represent external factor enough there. Nazism will remain Nazism. If we correspond with Nazism, sort of reply, accountable probably as compliance, but while the Nazism doesn't mention it. We got the mass extremist agorams doing reputation along with the Nazis. And whether the reason and whether also the Nazism entities from which the reputation for this reputation isn't just sort of besides being falsehood, right? Whether reason there and whether another whether reason there and whether another version of whether reason there just and whether reason there just version of whether reason there after just version of whether reason there and whether and variants of but it's for to introduce whether present whether reason there to present and introduce themselves still whether still have to request for permissions of check out the level of the insolence and so on. That's after these had taken so much. We got automatron sadistic, we got automatron mad entities out there. But speaking of which, and whether at current, what are the points, and what are the gains of, and whether reason and whether not, what are the points of being a president? One gets envy, while the envy cannot be banked so much on. But while there is safety comparative, there's much more of a safety issue, whether probable to be much of a safety concerns, and have to do much more work, and the result is still a single family stuck in some home along with equality and diversity communities. This diversity and equality thing could be so dangerous, because if for me, this planet would have been hijacked. I had to produce probable considerable amounts ago of calendar duration of weather and minor rather of calendar years of weather in calendar dividends of weather reason and weather of calendar dividends of 8,000 pages of content, and weather reason 8,000 pages and weather more, and weather reason there are more than, and weather reason there are 8,000 and weather more than, and weather reason there are more than 8,000 pages of content. Weather and weather reason there of a weather reason of content thereof, a weather reason of content thereof, a weather reason there another weather reason, and whether more than 8,000 pages of content thereof. This is a Vermania English, and the environment is foul. I don't want to affirm how great it is. Be identical to the vastity of Vermania. So who is the one who raised this question? 7 billion is all guilty. Can be a vastly generalization. Whereas in caution to whether mentioned most of the notes recently are formulated, one can probably notice, at least I can notice, the enfeeblement. So if I offer to reply to a pseudo, notice that these two pseudo is whether reason and whether one note, and whether reason they're directed to, whether reason there and whether two notes of, and whether a difference of. These could actually laugh and simply dismiss it. What's it gonna do? I call the police. The police are in it together. Boil these alive. It will be their fancy second on death. And the plotters to have themselves its own height. The plotters have, and whether not to them, and whether reason and whether minor and whether moderate, and whether reason and whether minor and whether instead of, whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether minor and whether moderate instead of whether reason and whether minor instead of, and whether moderate, and whether reason and whether minor instead, and whether moderate instead, and whether instead of. Nazism of entities have its own whether reason and whether have its own hijack corpus, and whether reason and whether have itself to blame. Reason was called Mark have itself as, and whether reason and whether have itself to, and whether reason and whether have itself to blame for failing this plot, and whether not to accomplish this plot in Nazism terms. Reasoners can be proud for themselves and got outsmarted. The enemy is resourceful. It's probably larger than our guys. And how does one take this giant abyssal hatred down? This hazardous dysfunction. And whether reason there has answers to, and whether corresponds to reason, there are mentioned whether mentions, and whether also, and whether reason there, whether reason there, and whether it mentions that of reason thereof, and whether reason there, and whether another. Also with, and whether reason there, or whether another, and whether minor, and whether minor remarkable, whether and what rather, and whether rather reason thereof, and whether another reason thereof. Nazis are going to stand by and not going to do much. And check out how much distraction noise is. The very voice box, and whether the very channels are flooded with their nonsense. And how did my cloak break, or whether how did these two find my identity? I got two liberals, such a whether reason, such as, and then minor, and whether also instead of, such as sisters from liberalism. The sound file needs to be throughout out there. It's going to be again next day. I spent some energy sort of replying, and how did that go? It's sometimes pseudo, utterly none of these words are even remotely unpacked. It's even imagined simply do some kind of factual churning out there, being a brutalist, butchering yourself while inviting me. This happened for how many years? These are so mental. It's like I have to go through every day. It's kind of why it's different from the original mention of a note for whether reason of the original for me don't matter. But then all these Nazis mention me as crazy. Okay, I'll boil them alive. I'll kill the 7 billion. Talking snitch just failed. I personally sit on them and rust them with some iron clock. It was better if we were more outdoors. This is more of an office and other description of film. That's if we hear in this specific instance midst of there are all kinds of other stuff. Certainly was something enfeeblement recently dreaded on to whether it received some of the performance will be a lot better. RD's edge on edge, attrition grind its own house to ensure this global degeneracy which it doesn't announce of, and these are literally dead entities. I would gladly shoot both of those so world peace comes faster and the world liberates, and it has its own theory and imposes onto others, goes against family values. What is that? What is that? Who would do that? Who would want it to do that? Along there certainly is some factor with being sort of reasonable, because it comes from Nazism, so one is sort of compelled to be agitated and amongst others, and sometimes under-explainable, as in or whether under-transformed or to literal forms of. The Nazis don't just comment along the way until I actually dip them into the oil factories. I do advocate for purchase and stuff. They're different, kind of different from the original formulate for a similar note. I'm supposed to be activating my battle stance. I'm not allowed to do that. The police will come and send a direct bullet to my face or something, or whether it's to the area that will be mentioned as a face. I have to go through every day, whether common enough moments within a week of duration amount, whether a week is divine, about tomorrow I'm getting publicly executed and which way the bullet is gonna go. Like, who fucking cares, man? Just nuke this whole 5 continents, plant the mushroom seeds across, grab an AK-47 and shoot all the pregnant Palestinians as women. This place is so gone Nazism. It is utterly not prioritizing towards peace, and all these Autobots engineer themselves to the 7 billion. Reason they're found whether beyond a bit from whether reason also idea of it can be considered as providence of whether reason there, whether also rather whether reason there and rather generalization reason there for whether reason there and whether generalization there. And it does this conditioning with a cheer. That is, we cannot outsmart ourselves at this remotely one bit. We're gonna be pinnacle. Whether reason there, whether mine instead of whether reason and whether also whether reason there and whether just whether reason there and whether another whether reason after another whether also and whether reason and whether also and whether reason there and whether reason there just and whether reason there and whether minor rather of go and whether reason and whether more enhanced or whether more quality of. Overall, it's a difficult situation. What is all that? What is all these humans doing? Why are they being this way? It's like zombification throughout. I'm supposed to be act like some frenzy, and then these Nazi congratulate still. It's like all this question to do some. Maybe they're all suicidal, but that's fantastic. Because that's a reason for me to knife these onto CNN and NBC and various stations. Piece of rotten garbage, soggish human. Reason there is kind of a rhetorical question can be quite popular. So we need to delete all these anti-Hitlerists, pound them to the next to the tanks, and simply have the tanks fire these shells to them, whether it's AP anti-armor piercing, or HE, whether he or whether height, or whether reason and whether another, whether HE and whether explosive, or whether high explosive. Blast these off to the tombs, and some document on suspicion will come along. We have the probable manpower employment. There will be some video just for extra documentations. This whole stuff is not built on friendship, right? The current structure is stitch work. It's probably the delay until I come through. The infeasible certainly is so much. Stand 5 were on, and if someone could translate the content, then it's utterly noticeable how liberal it is, and how these two throughout the young life had never even treated me above sort of being an animation model. Unless we start in how a lot of the crabs, they have eyeballs, don't they? They can think, and they have familyhood, they have unionship, and speak about clans, and regularly cooked by all these users, and sometimes they purposely cook them extra. It's like us stuck in a roulette game, and whether it's like them stuck in a perpetual, whether long enough, or whether do a sort of a game show, where the announcer goes 100 degrees, 110 degrees, 120 degrees, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180 degrees, and 190, keeps going up, slowly getting cooked, one by one, whether sometimes in groups. You got the uncles and mothers and fathers all cooked alive for doing what? No crime. They don't threaten against Hitler. Suppose any cows had the power to annihilate some innocent, they will never do it. Why bother? And these users keep come up with his own theory, and enforce our audience to side with its own opinions. And I'm supposed to be demanded here to perform. I'm not gonna demand. I'm just gonna joke around in fact, or whether a bit more Comedy Central, whether it speaks about F word a bit as a representative symbol, or whether is and whether also as a representative simple remark, or whether a representative, whether symbolic, or a bit of entry, or whether a bit of still of a portion of the whether a bit of entry of the fact that the probable considerable. Still, there will be so much hatred, so much madness, so much mess, and so much fuss. It makes it worse because when it's very much to help the situation, why would be somebody so against it? And what the reason? Why would the Nazis be so much against it even? Because in a way, we tolerate even Nazis. We don't tolerate the extremists. Whether the Nazis are part of Nazis, and that's probably the case here. And throughout, whether a lot of the occasions, the words Nazis probably could be considered to yet to providence of, whether recently yet to providence. In the case of the liberals, suppose there were liberals around me, they wouldn't remotely behave like this. Is it because someone is their child, therefore, what is this irresponsibility? I could convert most helicopter parents. Although there's sort of not very much of this probably of whether reason and whether of whether of whether of on which and whether reason and whether of whether reason and whether of whether first of whether reason and whether minor whether from whether reason and whether first of. Though the standard shouldn't shift them to accommodate to the Nazism entities, reason there to probable of on whether to probable on which and whether reason there and whether reason there and whether first and whether it's probable of on whether reason there whether to of another and whether reason there to of on whether reason and whether reason there to of whether reason there to of another and whether reason there to of on whether reason there to of. To go comparative a bit of a distortion note. We have near to 9 examples out there, and what is all this, right? What is all this? The TV stations, the internet, the web pages. They're not going to defend Detroit nor the next Detroit. If we cannot, in some of the other methods sort of persuade, what makes it as if therefore today the American public is going to join us? This is the identical monolistic robotic gang. Check out the fact check. Do they send a thank you letter? It's all ever this eeriness with these. I will personally have an assault rifle and a flask of acids, flip onto the selected ones, and sometimes after interview, and kill these insolents. What is so precious about 7 billion? Suppose 7 billion gun nature helps, culture even also flourish. There's nothing these represents the human race. Whether reason and whether mining instead of whether also modern instead of whether reason and whether straight to whether reason and whether also whether reason and whether another mining moderate and whether reason and whether modern is whether reason and whether another moderate instead of whether reason and whether reason and whether it follows from whether reason and follows and whether reason and whether I first from whether reason and just whether reason and whether instead of reason are humans whether reason are human whether reasons are humans whether reason they're another and whether reason they're humans of. the level of these brutal force is certainly quite out there, and the desecration against nature, these will not go without abandonment. Personally resort to nuclear weapons, chemical gas weapons. If these disobey whether reason and whether minor instead of whether reason to a fun, which and whether reason to a fun, and whether reason there to a fun, which and whether reason to a and whether reason there, and whether reason and whether and rather of Nazism disobey. I personally execute them with the assault rifle, and I discriminately provide them and whether execute them, and whether reason there kill them, and whether reason there yes, and whether reason there execute, whether reason there terminate, whether erase those, and whether reason there whether terminate, and whether reason there whether also, and whether terminate, and whether delete, and whether reason there and whether erase, and whether delete of, and reason thereof, which whether reason thereof is also accountable as it's a friendly gesture to provide some whether reason there and whether rather of is also to provide, and whether reason and whether also whether reason and whether it's also would be whether reason and whether also to provide iron supplies to. Since day one, we've been trapped by Nazism, and it's like we are living in someone else's opinion. And what is someone? Not even living. Suppose I cook them alive, it will be a second unless it will be still very much retain hostility throughout. Ever passive aggressive, and this factor churn stands for no law. The case of a lot of the intellectual monstrosities, and whether reason and whether also, and whether reason and whether just, and whether reason and whether reason and whether the extremists of the forums supplies its ugliness with some proverb, or whether reason and whether with some prominent, not so much comparative or metaphor, whether reason of comparative, or whether reason of comparison, of whether reason there comparison of whether reason or another, and whether reason or another, whether reason and another, and whether reason and whether, and whether reason and another, and whether reason there and whether minor rather of, and whether reason there and another, and whether reason there and whether of comparative. More a metaphor of whether reason there of comparative, more of whether reason of whether minor rather of, and whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether minor rather of comparative, as much of the subject of whether the noun, and whether the item, and whether to something it will mention to whether the reason, and whether reason and whether reason there and whether reason there mentioned to of will be a metaphor, and whether reason and whether metaphors, whether reason and whether another, and whether reason and whether metaphor and whether metaphors of, and whether reason and whether and whether and whether reason and whether minor, and whether reason and minor concept. As for accountable of which and whether of which probable accountable as for syllabus remark of, and whether for syllabus purpose for whether also the probable of the minor remark of, and reason there whether and whether metaphor and whether metaphors of. Not that the entities are vastly out there. There was a quote: "The end justifies the means." That could be on some levels, whether quite decently admirable, or whether regardable as fairly decent, and whether as decent of whether another, whether reason and whether fairly decent of. Suppose it was done right, and whether reason and whether minor instead of what suppose, and whether reason and whether suppose was proper performance of. Is there anything that's more hideous than a lot of the obscenery entities out there? What would Hitler II do to solve the same situation and to protect America? When it's hazardous Nazism, unique, whether reason or whether minor, instead of monolithic hate group entities. Suppose one tracks where the problems of all the hate
of the argument of the unreasonables, uncivilities vastly out there. In today's societies live as an empty locus. The fiends, the freaks, both were fiction, whether both were was core marks of whether reason was core marks, whether reason and whether reason and whether was core mark, whether reason and whether another and whether reason and whether was core marks of goes around and whether are identified as if they're ordinary. This is the most lethal force, the most danger that's been to society. Kings and queens didn't fall because they wanted to resign. They were taken down by this identical group, which these days, probably due to our spell, they started not covering it properly. Some of which may be cannibal as sort of at the advanced level of, from whether of a comparative short and a brief description, whether also they're mention of considerable as our guys. Whether reason and whether minor instead of whether reason and whether also whether reason and whether minor rather of to considerable as our guys thereof. To which on whether to from whether to whether reason and whether to from whether reason there whether reason there and whether to and whether reason there and whether thereof to probable of to could be of. Some of the actions of the Gorians immediately indicate whether indicates whether also whether minor and whether reason and whether minor rather of which and whether sort of the probable of whether reason and whether it's probable to could be from whether it's probable of to suitable of declares itself does not qualify to be citizen card holders. Accountable if and whether reason there, just and whether reason there, will take whether reason there, hearing out, and whether reason and whether hearing our team, of whether reason there, whether hearing our team, and whether reason there will be a whether reason there, and whether will be a whether reason there, whether will be a whether reason and whether reason there, and whether there will be a minor recess of whether reason and whether there will be a another and whether reason there and whether another and whether reason and whether there will be a minor recess. Whether reason there and whether there will and whether reason there and whether reason there and whether there will be a minor recession. Whether reason there and whether minor instead of whether reason and whether of whether reason there and whether there will be a minor recess session. The comparative of may not be as much of and whether may not be trust and whether reason and whether may not be much and whether reason and whether may not be as much and whether reason and whether may not be much endorsed.